I'm Heather Zykowski, the babe with the power, and coming up next on WAYO LP Rochester is The Sound of Tomorrow, where we are discussing how Ross broke the internet. We're going to be talking about some voting stuff, and we've got a little bit of sensitivity discussion that we're going to have because you know how sensitive we are on The Sound of Tomorrow. But first,
Hi, honey, I'm home.
great. But you only call me honey when you're being deliberately condescending. And also, you don't live here.
Well, in this case, I'm not. And also, now I do.
Well, that'll be a first then. And also, you can't just come in and live in my house without at least asking me first.
I think you're missing a key legal doctrine here.
Doubtful. And why are you scrunched down like that?
Squatters' rights, Heather. Squatters' rights. Jeesh. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. It's simple habeas corpus.
Show me the body?
I would love to, but my knees are locked and I'm not sure I can get up on my own, so.
Okay, let's start from the beginning. Why do you want to live in my house anyway?
It's just that with the Supreme Court, and all the anti-gay bills across the country, I'm a little concerned about my marriage, Plus, I put a big old scratch in Mike's car and didn't tell him about it, so I'm doubly concerned about my marriage.
I mean, you're probably fine on the scratch bit, but I do understand your concerns on the other stuff. Still, without wanting to sound insensitive, what's any of this got to do with me?
Oh, so I figured, just in case, I'd establish residency somewhere else. So, in case the gay police come to get me, not like gay police officers like you sometimes get at bachelorette parties,
Yeah.
That would be okay. That'd be fine. But, like the bad kind.
Stop being gay in the name of the law.
You get it. That was a really good impression. So you'll understand why I'm squatting on your living room carpet.
Still not so much.
Oh, see, okay. I'll break it down for you. I'm gonna trick the gay police with my false house and my trophy lady bride.
So, in this scenario, I am the trophy bride?
Now you're getting it.
I mean, that is a little flattering.
But don't you get any ideas. We're not gonna make love or nothing.
I'll try to pick up the pieces of my shattered dreams and move on.
Okay, fine. I mean, if you're gonna cry about it, I suppose we could. But you're gonna have to show me how.
I bet you know how.
You would be surprised what I don't know about straight people.
Ross, this isn't just some game.
Oh, that reminds me. I'm also going to need you to teach me how to throw a ball like a boy.
If you need sports tips, you're kind of barking up the wrong tree.
Is that good? I don't know sports metaphors, so.
It's not great. None of this is great.
Okay, let's cut to the chase, Heather. The ways of sports or the ways of l'amour? Your refusal to teach me at least one of these things will be construed as homophobic.
That hardly seems...
Homophobia!
Fine.
Okay, baseball then?
No, the other one. It'll be quicker.
Okay, but don't smudge my mascara.
Don't smudge my mascara.
Will I need to stop squatting for this, or? Yeah, we'll figure it out.
It depends.
Sure. I don't know. You're just going to have to... Is there a book? I don't know.
There are lots of books. I'll show you.
Who knew? All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Ross Johnson, your favorite co-host.
And I'm Heather Zykowski, the babe with the power. You are listening to The Sound of Tomorrow on WAYO 104.3 FM, Rochester.
Wow.
How are you doing?
That is a place. I'm doing great.
That is a place.
Great. Yeah.
That's another WAYO slogan, isn't it? WAYO. Yeah. That's a place.
That's a place. It's in a place and you're in a place and connecting two places, I guess.
Yes, there are many places to exist.
Right.
We being in none of them.
Heather.
Ross.
I have a confession.
What is your confession?
I'm a dirty, dirty boy.
Yeah, you are.
Dirty, dirty, naughty boy.
Mhm.
I so, you know, summer is the time when people come and have, young people's their thoughts turn to love and romance, and there's fewer clothes because it's so hot. It's been so hot. You just
Mhm.
take your clothes off
Yeah.
because it's filthy. You do it. You got to do it. There's no clothes. That's the rules. So, so I so I've got this like elliptical machine, but it's like halfway between a climber and an elliptical machine, right?
Mhm.
So um so I decided, as I see other people doing, because I like to do what the kids are doing, makes you popular, makes you feel good, like you're hip and cool. And I was like, I'm gonna do a little Instagram story where I'm just on my stair stepper thing. I'm just gonna be like, good morning. And
Oh,
that was
wow. I haven't seen this.
right. So well, it's gone because it was a story, so it's over. But the
Rats.
time
This
has
was a
passed.
while ago then.
Yeah, it was like a few days ago. So
Darn it. I've got to start. I'll pay attention for your stories. I don't watch everybody's.
so I so I'm doing that, and I felt like I was being very cheeky, right? I didn't have my shirt on, but the video was like it was right. I know, but it was framed like as though I were wearing an off the shoulder shirt. Like that's the level. Like there was not you weren't getting you weren't getting nipples, or there was no navel, there was no
I'm
nipple.
getting so
You weren't getting.
warm.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll stop using those words that I felt like I was being like cheeky, like ha ha ha. I'm
Yes.
not wearing a shirt, but also I'm filming this from like a half inch below my neck, right? Like didn't feel like I was doing anything too horrible. So I get like one message from it, like people I know, and they're sort of like, oh, this is like an OnlyFans, and I'm like, and I was sort of like, oh, they're joking because I did something cheeky, this is as dirty as it gets up in here. Um, and then somebody else did, and then somebody else did, and I was like, okay, people are really finding this amusing. I don't know, it's surprising.
May
And
I
I want
ask,
sure.
like, is there anything from these messages that you can quote?
No, it was just sort of that, like, oh, this is like an OnlyFans account. What do you do?
Okay.
and then
All
fin-
right.
and then finally somebody was so I'm looking at the video again. And because of the movement of the machine, I'm sort of like bouncing up and down. I'm
Uh-huh.
sweating
Yes.
and I'm sort of breathing heavy because I'm on the thing. And I'm doing this up and down motion. I mean, so the one of the last messages I got was finally like, are you on like a stair step or something? Because it really looks like you're just bleeping someone. And it really took like multiple messages from people being like, and nobody was like,
Yeah.
nobody was like, this is disgusting, get rid of this. They were just like,
Right.
uh and finally
What's
I needed
Ross
like
doing on the internet?
yeah, finally I needed the last person to explain to me like, oh no, it looks like you're it
Right.
looks like you're
Yes.
doing what two people do when they're very much in love.
Right.
um So, how sometimes you'll see those memes where it's clearly a shot from like a porno, and but then the caption will be something like, "Oh, when the green beans are delicious," or whatever. I don't know. I'm not good with memes, but you know what I mean. Like it's clearly a shot of someone like someone's face or something, and it's clearly from a porno, but the caption is like, "Oh, when you're really enjoying your cartoons," or whatever. Something completely. It was like the opposite of that. It was like the complete opposite of that, where like nothing was going on. um, but everybody just assumed it was really filthy. So, I will. Who knows what you could find on my Instagram account?
I know. Well, see,
I'm
I
very
didn't know
naive.
that I didn't know that we were going, like, all the way to some kinda Insta story that you're getting all kinds of messages on, because you've been posting all kinds of foxy pictures on Insta. I have noticed that.
Well,
Posing
here's the
cute
thing,
with your
Heather.
dogs and stuff.
Here's the thing, Heather. We have 3 months of good lighting in Rochester, and then after that, it's all clouds and pizza. So, I I figure if I'm gonna post
Yeah,
selfies of me and or my dogs and or me and my dogs and my husband or me and my husband, whatever, do it now. Before
yeah.
because you get
Yeah,
that,
before we're just in the dark again.
we're in the dark. We all get that pallor.
We
Well,
do, that
the
Rochester
the
pallor.
the more melanin deprived of us, especially, we get
Yes,
that
especially.
Rochester
Yeah,
pallor.
we get, like, the pallor where
It's
we
like
look
the blue,
ill.
sort of like you can see,
Yeah.
veins and things, and it's
Yeah.
because your skin gets like papery and transparent. So
Welcome to Rochester, where all the white
right,
people look like death's head masks.
right. It's the season for selfies. So yeah, that's my story. So I didn't get banned from Instagram or anything, but it feels, from what people were saying, it feels like a close run thing. I don't know.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm glad you didn't get reported. That's good.
Thank you. Like I said, no one was shaming me or anything. It was just like,
And that's really good too. I do like that it took like a whole series of messages for you to be like,
yeah.
oh.
I really had to watch it again. And I guess, you know, if you're feeling if you're feeling like you're going to post something cheeky on Instagram, I guess, and you care, maybe think about not doing it at like 6 in the morning. you know.
Oh no, that's even worse. Oh, so people started their days with this.
Right. Yes.
They're like, oh, what was Ross do? Does he know he posted this? Did he
Was that
mean to
supposed to be
just like
private?
save this?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And you see, of course it's me of all people, because you see people post, you see like Twitter and Instagram, you see people like, I'm in a jock strap, and you go, ha ha ha, that's cute.
Yes.
Of course I'm the one that's showing a just below like a half inch below the shoulder picture. Again, as though I'm wearing an off the shoulder shirt, and you know, giving everyone the skeeves.
Well, I think that's fantastic. I think you should keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for
Maybe
behind the scenes, Ross has also been being, and you can check these out on YouTube if you can find our channel. I don't really know how to tell you how to get to it, but you can see these videos of what I see. But he only does it before the camera goes on. Before this one, Ross was like giving himself a sexy neck massage. I mean, I think
What do
he's
you mean,
really.
like this?
See, look at him. Last week he was wearing that shirt with the cut off sleeves. I don't know. He's trouble.
It's there's a name for it, and it's midlife crisis.
I thought you were going to say hot man summer.
I did. It is, well. It's hot man. It's hot midlife crisis man summer,
I love it. I'm here for it.
which is a new thing I've just invented.
I think it's really good. I like it a lot.
um, and we did just buy a new car, so
You did.
there's a whole,
That's
there's a lot of stuff
exciting.
going on here. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I I don't know if I should say. I don't know if it matters.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know if we
don't
should
know
say
if
the
you
car
want
at
to
this point, but
say.
it's one of those things where like cars are such a weird thing to shop for right now that
Yes.
we will receive our car in 4, but probably 6 to 9 months. So, but
Yeah.
it's okay. It's sort of okay. Like, I was sort of, we're sort of like, we've got 2 cars that we needed to make decisions on. That kind of
Right.
thing of like, we've kind of been talking about getting a new car for a while, and then that thing of like,
Mhm.
well, there's, I can put a little money into this and it'll be fine.
Mhm.
But do I want to put money into this if I'm getting a new car?
Right. And sorry listeners for this because this is just like two friends catching up on their lives. I still have the misconception that you drive a new car. Like when I think about the car that you drive, I'm like, that's Ross's new car because
From
I've
2008.
that's the thing. Like I completely forget a lot of time has passed since you had the car previous to your new car that is no
Yeah.
longer new. But it's funny when you said you had to make some decisions on it, I was like, that's right. His car isn't new. I think it's
Yeah.
new.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a 2000. I have a 2009 right now, so
Yeah.
it's not unreasonable. So Um, and both of our cars are a little like we're getting there a little bit. So we decided like the car we wanted is a little pricier than sort of what we were maybe thinking of initially.
Mhm.
So we decided like, okay, we'll put a little money into the newer car and just keep that, and then we'll get this new rather than like trying to get two new cars at once, which was going to be, I mean,
Yeah.
even if they were cheap, that was going to be sort of a wild thing to do anyway. So
Mhm.
we
Yeah.
we batted that around briefly, but then it was like, yeah, that's going to be expensive no matter what. So
Wow, that's very exciting. New vehicles, always exciting.
thank you. It's such a weird. I mean, I know people, and I think we both have friends who are just like, "Oh, I got a new car this weekend. I just traded in my car and got a new car
Yes.
this weekend." And to me, it's such like a. Again, I have a 2000. I'm driving a what? I can't do math. Like a 13-year-old car right now, so
Right.
it is not
No,
as common with us.
that's another one I think where you and I are very, very similar. Because of
Hmm.
course you'll remember my crisis last summer when my 2003 finally got to the point where the mechanic said, "No, it's not safe to drive, and no, we will not repair it. Please get a new car."
Right.
And I was driving a 2003, not necessarily because I like couldn't obtain a new car if I'd wanted to. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to go through any single step of any
Mhm.
of that process
Yeah.
at all. But we
Agreed.
do. I don't know how this happens because I have at least, I'm thinking right now of two friends who do the thing where they're like, "Oh, yeah, no, no, I was driving that car 3 months ago. No, I've got a different one now." I'm
Yeah.
like, what? How is this not like just painful for you having to get
It
a new
seems.
vehicle?
Yeah. I mean, there's a. I mean, it just seems like a pain in the butt. I mean, there aside
That's,
from the money
yeah.
thing, I mean, there's like I mean, obviously if you trade in a car that you've had for not that long, you get a lot of money for that car, but there's still a little bit
Hmm.
of a loss. So, I mean, money's one thing, but cars are always money no matter what. So I guess that's
Yes,
know,
always.
that's a wash. But yeah, it seems like a pain in the butt. I was dreading because we had planned to go to this dealership. We had it scheduled because we had to go out of town. Because again, like cars are weird and stuff's hard to find right now. So we had to go to like halfway to Buffalo, and I was like,
Mm,
I mean, I had to like
yes.
just emotion, because it's the whole, and then you're like, the salesperson we dealt with. This is really boring as hell. I don't know why we're subjecting people to this, but so
Sorry, listeners. This is once again, friends are catching up on their lives.
we'll get to something in just a
We
minute. You guys
will.
hold
We'll
your
read an
horses,
article from NPR. It's fine.
guys, gals, non-binary pals. We'll get
That's
to
right.
something in a second. But our the salesperson was very nice and laid back and friendly. But then you've got that thing of like, I'm interacting with a salesman and it's a pretend
Hmm.
interaction and you have to pretend, and then what if you don't like it? And then it's really awkward because you feel like you wasted their
Yeah.
time, and it's
Hmm.
all that stuff
Hmm.
and paperwork.
Oh
So
yeah.
anyway, but this was relatively smooth.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just every part of it. Because even I knew exactly the two vehicles I wanted to see when I went to get my car last summer. And
Mhm.
even that, just the go in, you've got to talk with someone. You've got to wait while they find it. You've got to fill out the paperwork. Then I knew I was going to buy one of those vehicles.
Yeah.
Even with that, this is what I am going to do. It was still a whole lot of go here, go there, fill out this, fill out that, do this, talk with these people. And then there's the whole rigmarole of like, we can't find the other keys, come back for the
Ugh.
other keys. And it was just back and forth. And it was probably the easiest it ever is getting a car.
Mhm.
And still, it was just too much back and round and sitting and waiting and just, yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you, this was like the easiest it's ever been, but also maybe because it's a sort of a bifurcated process that we're doing of like you do
Mm-hmm.
half of it now and half of it in approximately 9 months when your car shows up. So, I guess we'll see what happens in the future. But Heather,
Ross.
should I just keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. I know you have stuff too. I don't want to hog the show here, but so this is, I guess this is getting slightly untimely, but I feel like this is gonna come into play. I wanted to talk to you because this was so after our last Wednesday show, there was a big across the nation. There were a bunch of primaries and things like that. There were a bunch of it wasn't not everyone necessarily had something to vote for, but there were elections that were going on in various places. And there were some interesting results, but I want to talk specifically about what happened in Kansas because it was sort of a big surprise, and it is interesting and leads into a lot of things that we're talking about. So basically, I won't do the wording of it, whatever, because the wording is like they did this complete word salad, and I'm not sure who made this amendment. So there was a ballot referendum. There the Kansas state constitution currently has a provision about protecting the right to abortion.
Okay.
And there was a ballot referendum to get rid of that because, of course, with the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, Kansas, one of the most
Right.
reliably red states in the nation, was immediately like,
Mhm.
we want to change this. We want to get this out of the Constitution. Didn't matter when, as long as abortion was constitutionally protected, it didn't really matter. But now it matters. So we can wipe out abortion in the state of Kansas in one fell swoop. Here we go. Let's do it. Let's go. Woo, is what some people in Kansas were saying.
Mhm.
That's not a
Mhm.
direct quote, but so
Mhm.
although I'm sure somebody said that. So the this ballot referendum, people went to vote, and I guess I'll just skip to the end here. So it so there was a lot of there was a lot because it was so weirdly worded, right?
Mhm.
There was a lot of money behind the referendum to get this thing out of the Constitution. Now remember, no is the appropriate is if you're pro-choice, if you're pro-abortion rights, no is the appropriate. You don't want to change the
Sure.
Constitution. But it was very confusing. And then the way it was written, again, I
Mhm.
don't know who wrote it. It's a word salad. I won't even read it, but like it's a complete word salad, the amendment. And people were so anti-choice, people and lobbying groups and politicians were actively trying to confuse people. They were actually buying
Right.
ads and sending text messages that said like, "Hey, if you're pro-choice, make sure to vote yes to
Mhm.
get aborted." So there was all this stuff. Just it's Kansas. There's a massive truly massive disinformation campaign. So no, the no vote, which again is the pro-choice vote to not change the
Mhm.
Constitution and to keep abortion rights enshrined. The no vote won about 60-40,
Mhm. Okay.
which is sort of amazing given that it's Kansas.
Yes, it is.
The reason I bring this up is it's a great. I mean, we're at the point where again, I don't know what the future for national abortion rights is.
Mhm.
Right now, the pro-choice politicians in Congress, as much as people keep screaming at them and saying, why don't you do something on this? They don't have the votes. Those votes don't
Right.
exist right now, not in the Senate. So that's very limited, and the administration has made some moves with what it can do as far as just unilaterally as part of the executive branch. They've the President Biden and Vice President Harris have done some stuff good, but at the moment the real battles are state by state by state,
Mhm.
because that's where the Supreme Court has basically thrown it back to.
Right. And I did hear about this last week, and I saw an awful lot of, kinda jubilation. Like, "Way to go, Kansas. Knew we could count on you, Kansas." And I do, wonder if I will ever be my usually jubilant self again. I'm not right. Um, so I don't know when or if I will be my formerly usual jubilant self again, but as much as I wanted to join in that cheering and, "Oh, this is a huge triumph, 60-40 even. Yay, it's legal, it's legal." That morning, I had woken up and it's my tendency to just leave the NPR news going, just
Hmm.
kind of general coverage of national and local events. And the thing that they were noting in the discussion I caught about this is there are 4 clinics that provide abortion healthcare services in Kansas. So, as much as it's legal, you can legally go to one of those clinics. It's still kind of effectively illegal or impossible for a lot of people who might need abortion care to access abortion care.
Well, true, but I mean, remember that was the same before Roe v.
It
Wade. So
was, and that's happening in so many states, but I think that's something that weighs heavily upon my mind. Um,
yeah,
how even though when before Roe v. Wade was overturned, there were still so many barriers to receiving appropriate health care for people who might need the health care that even anything that might seem like a triumph, and it is a triumph. I don't want to say that it's not, but it, it's still just so awful, right?
it is. It is, but I mean, I guess at some point you have to think about who, who's hurt and who benefits and who, because for, I mean, for everyone, every person who now has the chance to potentially, um, have their full reproductive rights, have their abortion rights in Kansas, that's a win. I mean, if it's one person who's able to
Yes.
exercise their medical rights is a win. So I guess, I think and this is me telling myself, but this is not me telling you. This is me telling myself. I think we have to be careful about, I guess I guess it's not going to be perfect for a long time to come. But I think letting perfect become the enemy of the good when there are people that, I mean, to sort of throw our hands up and say, well, I guess I don't care if anybody has their rights, which is kind of what your brain does. Like, well, this is not great, so nothing, there's no point to anything, as opposed to,
I think instead mine is doing like, okay, in theory that's a win, but it's got to get so much better. Fighting
well,
can't end.
absolutely, but I mean, here's the thing. So, but here's the thing, like, so with this vote, if Kansas
Mm,
can support abortion rights 60-40,
yeah.
and there have actually been some polling about other states with that. There are a lot of other states with these types of, bills coming up or referendums coming up, and it doesn't look much better in most other places. So, the bad news is Roe v. Wade's gone and abortion isn't protected nationally. And the bad news is
Mhm.
all the stuff that was going on before Roe v. Wade is still going on, which is
Right.
attempts to curtail people's rights in any way possible.
Yes.
But the bit of light, I say the small bit of light, but like if you're a person in Kansas who needs an abortion, who needs medical care, this is this is great news for you. This means you don't have to, yes, you're limited in where you can go, but it means you don't have to travel
Yeah.
across states. It means like
Right.
you have at least some options. This will benefit a certain number of people. I don't know how many,
It will.
but there are a not zero number of people who will now have, will now be able to get medical care that they would not have been able to get otherwise.
Yeah,
And
and
again,
in some of the more major urban centers, there may even be the people who, if they did live in a town 2 hours away, wouldn't be able to access the care they need, but because they live near the clinic, they can.
right, right. So I mean, I get what you're saying, but uh, you know, eh, again, I think it's sort of an eyes on the prize situation of like how many people
Um,
can be helped, like how many people can benefit. And I think I see a lot of people who supposedly care about abortion rights who are sort of like, well, nothing we can do, I guess. Saying versions of that, even if they're not saying that exactly, but like, well, nothing we can do. I guess we'll just give up. And nobody benefits from that except the person who doesn't feel like doing anything anymore because they got tired.
mhm.
Like, and I get the feeling of tiredness. The other thing about it is like people turned out to vote in Kansas. Like people, like pro-choice people turned
Yeah.
out to vote in huge numbers, and that was why it was a 60-40 difference. If people hadn't, it wouldn't have. And those people who now have access to medical care would, in a giant state, would no longer have access to medical care. So there is stuff that people can do. And I get what you're saying about being discouraged, but it's there is stuff that people can do, and there's relatively simple stuff that people can do. And if your state is having one of these referendums, you can't sit on your hands because it's
Mhm.
going to make a difference. Even if it's not perfect, even if you don't love it, even if you want it better, I get it. I get it. I do too. But it's going to make a difference in people's lives. And sitting on your hands and going, well, it's not perfect, so I'm not going to do anything, is going to hurt people. You are actively hurting people who are not going to have rights that they would have, and are not going to be able to get medical care. I mean, people could, there will be people that will die. We know this
Mhm.
because
Well,
they
don't
don't
get
have
me
access
started
to.
on that.
No, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are people who will die because they don't have access to
Oh,
proper medical
yes.
care that might not die because the imperfect solution of the state preserved, a state vote
Mhm.
preserved that right. So it does make a difference.
It does. I don't know. I used to be bubbly and sunny, didn't I? I
When
go
was
to grim
that
so
exactly?
quickly. Huh?
I don't know when that was, but yeah, I don't. I'm sure. I'm sure there was a time.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it was a parallel dimension.
Yeah.
So, Ross, and the thing that we like to talk about here on this show is how we can be more sensitive about things and how we can communicate better and care better for our fellow citizens and our fellow human beings. Yes?
Yeah, that's a that's a thing we talk about.
So, this is something that you've brought up in the past a little bit about talking about disability sensitivity and avoiding ableist tropes.
Okay,
And
sure.
I've been seeing a lot more of this in the news lately. And I do have another article that I'm not sure we'll get to about the recent critiques of a couple songs, one by Lizzo and one by Beyonce, that
Oh yeah.
contained a word that some individuals felt to be very ableist and very rude. And Beyonce and Lizzo both went back into the studio and removed that word from the song and put in a different word.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting discussion as well. But first, I have this article from NPR by Shruti Rajkumar entitled How to Talk About Disability Sensitivity and Avoid Ableist Tropes.
Sure.
So, for this, they were consulting with a Kara Reedy, the director and founder of the Disabled Journalists Association, and Rosemary McDonnell Horita of Levant Consulting, a disability focused communications firm. And they were talking about common ableist tropes and the importance of avoiding them and how to talk sensitively. I can't speak at all, much less sensitively, about disability. So there are tropes, and I think we have all seen them, and they're kind of like not great because they're very infantilizing. The
Yeah.
first one that should be avoided is the inspirational narrative. And I think we've seen this a lot in culture, like someone who uses a wheelchair finishes a race and everybody goes, "Oh, you're an inspiration." And maybe and they say it like
Yeah.
that too. Like they don't they it's never said like, wow, I could never do a marathon like you did. You are an inspiration to me. It's always
Yeah.
like a look at you. You did a thing.
Yeah, and I guess I would say it's certainly possible to be it's certainly possible to be inspired by a disabled person, or for a disabled person to be inspiring, but it's that, yeah, it's like you say, it's the tone, whether it's
Yeah.
out of your mouth or in your brain, of like, oh, look at you, look at what you
Yeah.
could do,
Yep.
yeah, yep,
Yep.
100%.
So um there is a term, inspiration porn, that was coined by activist Stella Young, and that's something defined as objectifying disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. And McDonald Horita says the example is at prom season, the high school football player asks a girl with Down syndrome to prom. And
Mm,
then it's kind of it gets turned around. I'm putting this commentary on it myself. It gets turned around to like, look how nice that boy is. asking that poor, poor girl with Down syndrome to prom,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
Right.
then like makes the high school football player that we assume is able bodied, he's playing football and whatnot, like turns him into some kind of hero. And the girl with Down syndrome is just some kind of poor little victim
Yeah.
who like has like that's just her role in it. And when you start thinking about it, it's gross because if you just look at it quickly, like, oh, isn't that sweet? Kids going to prom. But then you start
Mhm.
looking at the deeper implications of it, and it's like, oh my, that's not nice.
That's not
Um,
great.
and it says in this article that videos of disabled people getting asked to prom get amplified because society perceives disabled people as pitiable and unlovable. And this is just one in, one example of how this kind of inspiration porn degrades, exploits, and others disabled people because it's
Yeah.
limiting, it's infantilizing. Um, so those are good things to avoid. And I also think for someone at this point in my life, I'm pretty able-bodied, pretty, I guess some people would argue about my mental fitness, but I guess I would put myself in that large category of people who might not have a reason to look at ableism and
Yeah.
people who might be socialized to be insensitive toward people with disabilities.
Yeah.
So it's something I want to kind of look at in myself and pay attention to as well.
Well,
And
and
then
it's
oh,
yeah.
go on.
Well, I was just gonna say, so I mean, I think it's so interesting with disability issues. I mean, I've had a lot of experience with um,
Yes.
people with all sorts of disabilities, and it's some of my best friends are disabled, so of course, let me tell you about it. No, there's I don't know, it's such an interesting sort of category because there's a combination of like reaction, and then also there's fear because it's a category of it's one of the few categories of like you can become disabled. I mean, you're not going to I'm not going to become black, right?
Right.
um you're not going to become gay. I mean, you might
Hmm.
someone can realize they're gay or whatever, or all that, but you're not going to make a fundamental change all of a sudden in yourself. But you can become disabled. So
Yes.
there's that. It's a weird category because I think there's condescension, there's
Hmm.
that sort of inspiration porn vibe, but then there's also, I think some of it comes out of fear because there's a I think there's a real like I want to alienate and alienize this person because I want to make sure I can stay as far away in my own head from them as possible because I'm terrified of that happening to me. And I mean, that's part of our I think that's part of our acculturation too, the idea that, being disabled is terrifying, or some disabilities, don't count if you've got glasses or
Hmm.
certain types of mental illnesses and things. Those don't count. Those are fine. But you don't want to become like those other people. It's interesting, and I don't want to say bad in a lot of ways, but just the ways we react to disability are so they're interesting. They're really interesting. The people, I came to early on like I, I'll give you an example of like a person that I worked with, and you know he was a jerk. He was a complete jerk. He had well, I don't need to go into his diagnosis, but he was severely disabled in several ways. He was a complete jerk. Complete jerk. And
Hmm.
people would be like, "Oh, how can you? That's terrible. Why would you think that about this person?
Oh,
He's a jerk." And it's like, "No, he's a jerk."
well, like he's mean and he's hard to work with.
I know
And
his
he's
family,
like,
they're all jerks.
yeah,
I know his parents, they're jerks. He's a jerk. If he had
yep.
kids, they'd probably be jerk. I mean, so I think I came to an early on like people are people. And I know, I've known people with Down syndrome, like very difficult functioning people, people who have extreme difficulties functioning, Down syndrome, or all sorts of diagnoses. And I'd rather hang out with them than perfectly fully able-bodied people. So I mean, I came to sort of a place in my head of like, people are people, man.
Mhm,
We all
mhm,
have our struggles. Some people's are greater, of course, and some people's are more obvious on the surface.
mhm.
But that doesn't mean anything. And I'm not trying to be like, look, let's all just come together and be people, but I think we need to come to a place in our heads of, people are people, and some people are
Right.
jerks and some people are great and some people are
Mhm,
fun and some people aren't. And you're going to like some people and you're not going to like some other people. And again, plenty of people have, and I've known plenty of people too, you know, paraplegic people, quadriplegic people, people in, also requiring all sorts of mobility devices, who are so much are perfectly happy, content, functional members of society who are satisfied with their lives and doing incredible things with their lives. And then someone who's, struggling in all sorts of ways, um will be like, oh, that poor person. It's like, well,
mhm.
just because they have something obvious on the surface, some sort of disability, doesn't make you better than them and doesn't make them
Mhm.
appropriate objects of your pity.
Yeah,
Because knowing that both of you, I pity you more than I pity them.
I know.
So sorry, yeah, I
No.
don't mean to hijack your
No, I think that's good, and I know that you feel passionately about this as well, so I figured we would have a good discussion.
yeah,
Um, the next thing that's brought up in the article is that disability isn't a monolith and shouldn't be treated as such.
yeah,
And I think there's also, again, so much of what I was reading in this article is there's a lot of making assumptions, there's a lot of infantilizing, there's a lot of disempowering that goes on when able bodied people are representing in the media or interacting with disabled people. And it's not great.
yeah,
McDonald Orita is once again quoted here saying, if you've interviewed and spoken to one disabled person, that's only one perspective in the whole community. So, trying to even diversify the voices who are speaking about the disability community, I think, is really important.
yeah,
And I think that's absolutely true. And an example I think of pretty often that's brought up is how you can use a person first or an identity first language
hmm,
to describe people. They give the example of a woman with autism or an autistic woman. And I know a lot of people who have autism or autistic people. And what I need to do is just pay attention to what they prefer,
yeah,
because I've met people who are definitely, they much prefer to say, I am autistic. And then I've met other people who prefer to say that they have autism. So
right,
that's one where I can just listen to my friends and respect how they would like me to address them.
yeah. Well,
Not
and
that that's all we talk about or anything, but it comes up like, well, you've said with your autism, you think about this way and this way. I think about it this way and this way. That kind of thing. Just
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think too, I mean, this is true of any quote unquote community, right? Like, there's such a diversity of opinions and thoughts and ways of doing things and ways of going about things with with the when it comes to disability. That is such a wide swath. I mean, again, and like I said, this is true of any community that we sort of lumped together.
absolutely.
But with disability, again, it's a category where anyone from any other community can become disabled or get a diagnosis that they didn't realize, or can have a disability. So many disabilities are not congenital; they're not from birth.
Mhm.
It's something that comes along later in life. So to try to pigeonhole, I think what you said is perfect. I mean, try to respect your friends and the people you're interacting with, and respect what they, um, you know, how they want to be referred to and how they want to be thought of in that regard. Because again, it's such a, to talk about the disabled community is such a that's such a limiting way to think of it, because there's certainly not going to be one there's certainly not going to be one perspective or one way of looking at things.
Well, and even if you look at some kind of disability, I'll go ahead and say OCD because I get to claim that one because I have diagnosis. Um,
Mm,
it manifests so differently for so many people. I also know a lot of people who have, like, they're just diagnosed with OCD. Even we are
yeah.
not a monolith. Like,
Right.
it's the weirdest thing how there is stuff that I very, very, very much have to have done and set as I need to have it set, that other people I know who have OCD are like, no, I don't care about that. Here's my things.
Yeah.
And even just like in my experience with that, it's interesting, and to me, because it's me, I find it funny about myself, but I
Yeah.
can also see how that could really limit a person's interactions. Like if all they knew about me was that I've been diagnosed with OCD, they could put me, I'm sure, in a lot of different boxes that don't fit. And if they won't listen to me saying, like, here's how it goes for me, okay?
Hmm.
Uh, they're never going to get to know me.
Yeah.
And there is another part with this disability isn't a monolith. There was a reminder that there there are also there are the stories of disabled people being just gentle saints, so pure and holy, they're nearly childlike, or they're nearly children even. There
Yeah.
is the other storyline that's written that it frames disabled people as being pitiable and unhappy or bitter all the time because they're disabled. And McDonald Horita points out that she, being a disabled person, there are days when she's frustrated that her body doesn't cooperate with her. And disabled people are also exhausted because there's so limited accessibility. There's pandemics. There's all this stuff that they're fighting for and fighting against. But also, that doesn't mean like that's all she is frustrated and bitter.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of different facets because, as we often say on the show, and I sometimes find myself saying in life, we're human beings.
Yeah.
Most all human beings have many facets. Um, there's another section here about the destructive nature of infantilization, which you've brought up in other contexts, mentioning the person who uses a wheelchair, who someone would go to talk to the person, but instead of talking right to them, they'd talk to their partner
Yeah.
who was standing next to them. And
Yeah.
things like that are incredibly common. And McDonald Horita defines infantilization as a non disabled person having more power than a disabled person and using that power against them to invalidate their thoughts, opinions, or experiences. And that's, it's one of the ways it can manifest is just assuming someone can't speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Often a person can. Sometimes they can't, but often a person can speak for themselves.
And it's very often not that hard in the sense that, again, we look at certain disabilities, particularly things that are right on the surface, that are very obvious, and we immediately start putting those people in boxes. And then if you say like, oh, you should respect this and respect that, it's like, oh, it's so hard, blah blah blah. But it's the same with any other person. Again, you meet any
Mm-hmm.
person at any point in your life, and there are things you're going to have to learn about them and how to interact with them if you want to be their friends and if you want to interact with them, or if you have a business relationship or whatever it is.
Yep.
That's true with any other person. I mean, again, I think the key thing is to try to think of a disability as like, oh, this is the obvious thing that I see, but that's not necessarily. And again, any person, you can, the most able-bodied looking, conventionally attractive looking, quote unquote normal person you're going to see walking down the street, they could have all sorts of stuff going on in their life.
Uh-huh.
They could have disabilities that you can't see. They might have mental concerns you can't see. They might have family members who are ill. There are so many struggles that we just don't know about when we meet people. So the fact that we see a disability and go, "Oh, that's the number one most important thing," you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily.
Right.
It might be for someone.
Absolutely.
It could be their number one most important thing. That's the whole point. People are different. You don't know, but don't assume.
Yeah, most definitely. And since we are running a little low on time, I might go through these a little bit more quickly. They give in the article some best practices when talking about disability. And the first one is center disabled voices. And I liked that this article included a lot of commentary from people who are disabled, speaking about their experience, and they're disabled people who work with disabled communities.
Yeah,
That always seems important when you're talking about some kind of group, to actually talk with that group or look up sources from that group. I'm glad that NPR has resources like this available too, so that I don't have to go and reach out to disabled friends going, hey, so do this work for me and tell
yeah,
me all the things I need to know.
right,
Because as much as there are people who might want to share about their lives, as with anything, it's not the nicest to try to get your friends who belong to some group to do all the heavy lifting to inform you
right.
or inform me. Recognize the disability as a culture and identity, not a problem. And it's brought up here, again, by McDonald Horita. We've barely heard from Reedy. I'm not reading any of her quotes. Is saying that there's a medical model that says disabled people have to be fixed or there's something inherently wrong with us. And there should be science and we should all aim to have a cure or live more normal.
Yeah.
That's also, I can see how offensive that could be to 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 be a disabled person and have people, and this is new information to me, but I'm sure it happens, have people always asking when they can fix you. Are
Yeah.
they going to be able to fix you? I do remember seeing something from a friend who posted on Facebook that they were getting a new wheelchair. And I guess I felt glad about myself, maybe give myself a little pat on the back or something, because I was like, oh, that's exciting. Good for them.
Yeah.
But then a little bit later, they were clapping back about, apparently they'd gotten a lot of like, oh no, do you really need the chair?
No.
Oh, you're going to be in a chair. When they were psyched. And I
Yeah.
was psyched that they were going to be able to get around better. Um, and I think there's a lot of that too. Do you really need those crutches? Do you really need that mobility assist device?
Well,
And
no, and I've known a lot of just I have a lot of experience with deaf people in the deaf community and a lot of deaf friends I've known and that I've worked with, and I will tell you there is a strong contingent of the deaf community where bringing up the idea that deafness is something that should ever be fixed or can be fixed or needs to be fixed or is in any way make someone in any way inferior is like I mean, there have been literal riots over this. So,
mhm,
and fair enough. Like
yeah,
I can't get into anybody's head. I mean, there's stuff about myself that I'd like to fix, and there's stuff about myself that if somebody came along and said I'm going to try to fix that, it's gonna
right.
it's fighting words. So that's don't don't assume that somebody's got something wrong with them.
Yeah, yep. That goes for a lot of things too. I realize I should maybe even not be the big proponent of LASIK that I am, but I don't think I've said it to anybody like, you ought to get your eyes fixed. I think I've said, have you
Yeah,
considered LASIK or
yeah,
anything like that? Um,
yeah.
but there
I
is
don't know. I don't know if nearsightedness is quite as big a political
exactly. It's not.
football,
It's
but
not
yeah,
at all. But it's kind of rude to
yeah.
say that about anything like,
True,
"Oh,
true.
are you gonna get your hair fixed?" Like, that's a pretty easy fix, but that's still not, like, a very polite thing to say to someone.
Yeah,
So there's do research beforehand. I think we already covered that, like, just there's information out there, and most of us have the internet. Lots of good, helpful stuff for folks. And then there's the last point is recognize intersectionality. And as we said with disabled folks, they're not a monolith. says disability crosses every other community and marginalized identity group. According to the CDCP, 1 in 4 Black people in the US has a disability, while 1 in 10 Asian Americans has a disability. And yet, within disability rights spaces, the voices of white men with physical disabilities have been centered and uplifted the most historically. Go
What?
figure. I know, can you believe it?
That is shocking to me. I'm shocked by that.
And a last word from McDonald Horita. When we talk about disability, it's important not just to think about those that are visible, but also non visible disabilities in those communities who have historically been marginalized and left out. So I don't know. I thought that this was a pretty good article. I feel like we buzzed through it even a little bit quickly, though I think we spent plenty of time on it. But full of information. It's just over at NPR.
All right. I
And it
love
was
it.
a good read. Had a
I
lot
think
of
it's a
good
good
stuff.
I think it's a good thing for people to think about and try to recenter their thought process on, you know. I think it's always a good thing to meditate on
Yep,
or
absolutely.
whatever.
As with so many things, you just check in with yourself because there's an awful lot of stuff that happens in society that sometimes you don't even notice it. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, wait, no, I do think like that. Shoot,
Yeah.
yeah, I see why that's not great that I think like that. I think I
There
could do
there
better.
there are certainly, there are certainly disabilities that I will see and my first reaction will be like, thank goodness that's not me. And that's
Mm,
not a great way to that's something where you want to have a little talk with yourself about,
yep,
there's your feelings aren't necessary aren't invalid or inappropriate, but how you express them, and sometimes
right.
it's worth it to reconsider how you're thinking about something.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and even, I don't know, every once so often I look at something and I'm like, oh no, did I behave inappropriately? Or did I have a thought that I would prefer to not have as my first thought? Sometimes I check in and I'm like, all right, no, good. I think you're okay on that. Sometimes I'm not, but it doesn't hurt to, I mean, sometimes it does actually hurt to have to do that kind of check, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, well, and again, it's about, I think respecting other people is also a way to live your life more authentically as well. I think the world opens up for you once you start tossing away preconceived notions and stereotypes. The world and humanity sort of opens up for you in new ways, new and unexpected ways, and it's kind of worth it.
Yeah.
There's kind of a there is compensation for doing that work.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's not all to help other people. It benefits
No,
you as
not at
well.
all. No. I wonder how much I'd do it if it were just for other people.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I try to be nice and polite, but I'm also kind of greedy.
Yeah. on
If
on
you
that note,
space
Heather's
cadets are
Heather's
greedy
greedy.
for more amazing content, stay tuned right here to this very station, WAYO-LP Rochester, and tune in for us next week.
All right. Was that good for you too?
It was wonderful. We can do it as many times as you want.
I could almost do it again right now.
I think I could too.
They don't tell you that straight lovemaking is just binging a season of Vampire Diaries together and then taking a nap. I'm really rethinking some things about my life.
You still can't live in my house.
Homophobia!
Just pull up season 2.
All right.